So I'm sure many of you have seen tier lists before. Formerly the territory of just fighting games, this topic has applied to all sorts of niches of content. And while things like cereal tier lists or fast food tier lists are all in good fun, us fighting game players, we take tier lists pretty seriously. And we debate it a lot because it's the point of reference for where the game is at the moment. Which is why in this video, I want to talk about a topic that surprisingly has not been touched on very much, which is times pro players were wrong. And I want to start with a pretty iconic character to get y'all in. I want to talk about SSJ Goku from Dragon Ball FighterZ. So this game released in 2018 and it was a huge release. It got people from all across the fighting game community to all convene to play an Arc System Works 3v3, which at the time we were like, wow, they're making this massive team game. Today we're like, it's not so crazy, huh, with Marvel Tokon on the horizon. And this game was a lot of people's first experience playing an Arc System Works game. And specifically in this game, they used the same engine as they did with Guilty Gear Xrd in order to make the graphics a lot like the anime. Now, Dragon Ball FighterZ is split into seasons, and specifically in the first year of the game actually got multiple patches throughout the year. This covered things like oversights, bugs like infinite combos, and centralizing tactics at the time. So a simple example is there was an oversight found with Android 16 and my favorite character, Wink Wink, Adult Gohan, right when the game came out. And stay with me here because the multiple patch thing is important. We're going to come back to that. So in many fighting games, scoring a hard knockdown is very important because you could set up your game plan, winning condition, whatever, off the hit. And it's so important that characters that have this as their core strategy have their own archetype in fighting games. We call them set play characters, and this is a character type that I enjoy playing. Now in DBFZ, however, while scoring a knockdown is an advantage, there are many ways of mitigating this situation. So characters can delay their wake up various ways, or they can recover in the air, or characters could use a parry that pushes opponents away called Reflect. So the main way you would score a hard knockdown in DBFZ is to spend 3 bars of meter, so maximum 7, and even then not all the characters have a good offensive situation off this knockdown. So this leads us into the oversight. Now I'm going to use Android 16 specifically for this example, but Adult Gohan also had one of these. So if you saw before, this is like a kind of very basic Dragon Ball combo structure where you do the sliding knockdown here and the character flips up. Android 16 and Adult Gohan could do is they had moves, normal moves, that caused the same type of knockdown, set knockdown, as the level 3 situation that I showed you, which causes the same type of knockdown as this knockdown of SSJ Goku that costs 3 bars. In 16 case, he basically got it for free, and in a practical case at the time, people were spending 1 bar for it, but I think if we played that patch for longer, people would have gone for the routes that made this free. And this knockdown led to very tricky mix-ups like fast cross-ups, tricky same side, or the threat of another grab. So with all this focus on hard knockdown and tricky mix-ups, a character like SSJ Goku didn't really shine on launch. And funny enough, one of the big reasons why, besides just thinking about mix-ups, is also people would compare him to, of all characters, Super Saiyan Vegeta. Because this is a team game, so just because you don't have a tricky, strong, forceful mix-up like Android 16 or Adult Gohan doesn't mean that you're not a good character in some other way. Vegeta and SSJ Goku were both looked at as support characters, as in characters you use for their assists. The big thing here is that if you're watching and you played the game recently, you would know that you could pick from 3 assists when you pick a character, but on Dragon Ball FighterZ launch, you could only pick 1. So whatever assist that the game offered you, that's just what you had. So players quickly focused on characters that gave assists that were actually helpful, because also the power level was pretty low when Dragon Ball FighterZ came out. I know I sound like I'm talking about the anime this whole time, which is really, I'm not trying, this is what actually happened with the game. The thing about SJ Goku is that he did have ways to do mix-ups with many characters because his beam assist has a lot of blocks done. But one of the main problems people had was actually on what happens if the assist hit. So not in a situation like this, but more that you get sent full screen, so it could be hard to convert this into a combo. Compare this to SSJ Vegeta, and because of how his assist is multi-hit, it's very easy to convert into a combo, as well as simply add damage by comboing into it. On top of that was the character's solo point ability. So in my training mode settings here, I have the opponent set to standing, guard all, and then don't switch. So when I jump in on the character, since jump ins are overheads generally in this game and most games by Arc System Works games, he will block, but if I go for lows, he will get hit, which requires you to crouch block. And one of the biggest criticisms about SSJ Goku on launch was the fact that his crouching light was a mid and not a low. So a lot of people believe that his mix-up game was also quite weak. He did have a low option of his crouching medium to M, but this was slower, so people considered it to not be a good option for 50-50s. In comparison, SSJ Vegeta did not have this problem, and his crouching M was also a low on top of that. People will constantly say, oh, SSJ Goku has no mix, he can't hit you. But by the end of Season 1, after a couple of patches, nerfing Android 16 and SSJ Vegeta a little bit, SSJ Goku saw a ton of play on many top-level teams. What happened? So for starters, SSJ Vegeta's assist got nerfed so that it was considered a key blast. So what this means is that in this game, there's a key blast button, and they differentiate key blasts from beams. And one thing about these is that you could reflect in block strings, where other buttons you would not really be able to because you're stuck in block stun. So unless there's a gap of some sort that's created, you would not have the space to do it. So in the launch version of the game, Vegeta's assist was considered not to be a key blast, and they changed it so that it was a key blast. And this really helps separate SSJ Vegeta from SSJ Goku as a support character, because SSJ Goku's beam was not a key blast. Then the big mix-up problem was solved in two ways. Do you remember this knockdown? So if you play Dragon Ball FighterZ now, you might be very surprised to see how close the opponent is to SSJ Goku. As in the current version, SSJ Goku sends the opponent basically full screen. People found mix-ups with special properties on SSJ Goku's air moves. So there's two. So I'm going to use the one that I found personally, and I'm going to use another one that many people used. And they both rely on the same property. So this game has air dashes, so you can dash in the air, forward and back. And when you air dash, when you do attacks, you'll carry your momentum like this, right? Now, SSJ Goku has two attacks that stop his air momentum in the middle. He has his air dash JS, and he has beam. In the case of his beam, on the ground, when you do Kamehameha, you can actually aim it up. And in the air, when you do Kamehameha, you can actually aim it down, which is how I did that down angled beam. So what you would do is you would do this level 3 in the corner, and he would do his level 3 Kamehameha. He puts you out of the corner. You have enough advantage to run up and cross up. But you could do a run up and stop his momentum and get this hit and be able to convert the combo. Now, this doesn't look like it does a lot of damage, and it costs an extra bar, but because he's the third character in the team, the assumption is that you're generally playing him last, or you already have a bunch of meter from playing the game, or you're playing him in sparking. You will have the meter to do this, and this does close characters and close games. The other method being that you run up, and right when you're going over them, you stop your momentum with the down Kamehameha. Now, the funniest thing about this was that at the end of Season 1, so the first World Tour Finals for this game, it was really funny because both North American players and Japanese players have found this independently of each other, and people were saving it because Goku is a popular and strong character and support. So while people were watching like the early rounds of the tournament, of the last chance qualifiers, of all the players who hadn't qualified for the finals, of which I believe only 4 people actually qualified because of a special rule that deserves its own video totally. People were just whispering like, yo, who leaked the mix-up? Who leaked the tech? Like, who told people about this? And it was quite funny. The next character I want to talk about is another character that people consider to be weak when she released, but then ended up being quite strong. But you want to hold out for the last one for sure, because that's a character that people thought was broken, but ended up being honestly kind of mid. I want to jump to another IP though, Persona 4, specifically Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, the sequel to the original Persona 4 Arena. And specifically I want to talk about Margaret, the final DLC character in this game, and my main from when I made the game. And before I talk about her, I need to talk about just like the basics of Persona first, so you can understand how unique of a character she actually is. So this game is a 4-button fighter, so you have A, B, C, and D. And specifically, the A and B buttons are physical attacks on all the characters, and the C and D attacks are persona attacks. Now, there are characters that specialize in physical attacks, like Akihiko, so while he does have the aforementioned persona attacks, he doesn't use them very much naturally, like he's a boxer, so he wants to punch you. But then on the other hand, there are characters that use their persona quite often, and Margaret is one of them. So now a big thing here is the game has a system which determines where persona attacks appear on the screen. So what I mean is, let's take this attack. This is 5C, standing C. So when you attack with your persona is there, right? But usually your character is able to move first. So what happens to the persona while the character is able to move? Well, there are moves in the game where you could put your persona somewhere and it disappears, but while we can't see where the persona is, it's still there. So what this means is that you could put the persona out and then follow up with attacks, and attacks are designated in this way. So the 5C that I did before has this property of wherever the persona is, it will appear. A little complicated, but makes sense when you play around with it. This is referred to as persona displacement, and it's a pretty important mechanic in the game, albeit a secret mechanic. It's very cool. So Margaret is designed heavily around this mechanic, and she has 3 personas. So while Akihiko just has Caesar, Kaiser, she has 3. So she has Kukulin here, she has Artha, and she also has Yoshitsune. So she has 3, the Margaret selection. As you can see under the light bars, these are the persona cards, and this is specifically how much HP your persona has. So in the case that your persona gets broken, you are unable to use your C and D buttons until it recovers. Margaret has 8 persona cards, so this basically never happens. I played her for a year and a half basically in tournaments, and I probably have had this happen to me less than 3 times. So she's able to make liberal use of her persona while being fast and having a very unorthodox toolkit for neutral. She also has a high damage output, so she is quite a strong character. That being said, the general consensus when the character came out was that she was pretty weak and counterintuitive, which is not a great combination considering this game originally was marketed as a fighting game for beginners, people who played Persona the RPG to get into fighting games. So for starters, while she has a lot of unique normals that make her travel around the screen, her fastest normal was not on a light attack. So typically you would assume that the character's light attack would be the fastest, the medium attack would be medium speed, and the heavy attack would be the slowest speed. But that's not the case for Margaret. Her 2A is this traveling low. It's not that fast. It's a very good move for its use case, but it's not good for trying to get out of the pressure. Her actual fastest attack is this thing, which is her anti-air. And it looks really slow and looks like it has a lot of recovery because it low-key kind of does, but the fast part is here, the first hit here. But it's still slower than the average fast attack in this game. Characters typically have 5 or 6 frames as their fastest attack, and that attack is 7 frames, so it's, again, slow. So this means that her actual fastest attack as far as speed was a universal system mechanic, throw. But throw being her fastest attack leaned into another weakness she had around a system mechanic that everyone has, a universal reversal. Try saying that 3 times fast, by the way. So remember when I said that Persona was designed as a fighting game for beginners, specifically getting people from the RPG into fighting games? Pretty much all the special moves in this game are done via quarter circles. There's a couple of exceptions, but not that much. And if you're a Dragon Ball player and you made it here, it might sound familiar because Dragon Ball is the same. Basically, everything is a quarter circle in Dragon Ball as well. So neither of these games have Dragon Punch inputs. So if you know like Ryu Shoryuken, there's 6-2-3, forward, down, down, forward. You don't have this input in this game. So instead of having this input or even a quarter circle for a reversal, which Dragon Ball does, the game has a universal mechanic called Furious Action. And there are multiple types of these Furious Actions, and you perform the Furious Action by pressing the B and D button together. I do have to admit, I did lie to you a little bit because, for example, my vanilla Persona 4 Arena character from the original, Mitsuru, she does have a quote-unquote traditional DP. It's just not with the input. You just press 2 buttons, and she does something that looks like a typical Dragon Punch from another fighting game. Now, some characters like Yosuke have this, which doesn't look that impressive at a glance, but for a long time, it was one of the best reversals in the game, and it is a counter. Some characters like Kanji uniquely have a persona reversal. So you can see here, he summons his persona and does the reversal. And this is where another weakness of Margaret was shown. So like her sister Elizabeth, she has the worst type of furious action in that hers is this. It is a grab. So specifically, her reversal can be reversed. You could tech the grab. So the big thing here is that any tactics you would use to strike throw also beat her reversal. This combined with the slow mashing option makes defense really, really tough for her. So when the character came out, the basic take was that it was really hard to get out on defense, and you could just rush her down forever, and that, funny enough, this is going to sound funny to some of you who play right now, that her damage wasn't that high because things weren't optimized really. A side note about for people who have not played this game, when you get knocked down, you can't actually backdash on wake up for a couple of frames, besides I guess in Orgia mode. So this thing about defense is felt a lot more. But the big thing about Margaret is that at the time this was very rare. She released on console first, so this was pretty rare for Arc System Works games. Normally, they would come out in Japanese arcades first, they would play them for a few months, and then we would get it. So, I mean, I said a few months, but sometimes they could take a year or more. But in this case, Margaret came out on console first, and she didn't come to arcades for a little while after. And after I played this character for a couple of weeks, I was pretty sure she was quite good. So for starters, her neutral is amazing. She is super fast. This is a bit of an extreme comparison, but you could look like Kanji's run. He's not that fast, but she is very light in her feet on nimble. And she has many attacks that also move her, like her 5B and her 2A. And if they happen to slip by, you would adjust your position, which was pretty good. This also meant that a lot of her attacks were really active. So instead of like the move being really short and just disappearing right away, they would last for a long time and people would run into the move. So the aforementioned 5B, it's probably from like here, this version. This is a very long time to be active, and you could cancel into stuff on contact, where when the move whiffs, nothing comes out. This made it really hard to backdash against her and position yourself against her. And despite the speed thing that I talked about, she was surprisingly good at standing around and waiting for whiffs or seeing what the opponent did as well. She also had a powerful fireball for clearing persona and other projectiles. Her damage was also quite high, so we're going to be talking about the time, because by the time this version came out, the Persona 2.0, people knew that she was good. So while the disadvantage of this is that it's slow, the advantage is it's not a light attack. The damage you would get for hitting this on defense was quite high. Just over 4,000 damage in the original version, which is quite a chunk of health. And finally, her Desperation Super, Hasotobi, was the damage type. The simplest explanation I can give is that if the combo counter is a multiple of 8, then the minimum damage on the super would be higher. So this made her damage output when she was losing the game extremely high and very threatening. She also has a ton of tricky mix-ups at her disposal. So for example, she has this move, which is essentially an instant overhead that can be converted in specific situations. Specifically, when your persona is back here, you could combo off it reliably. And this move, this fireball, has this really tricky situation where she is over you, so this is considered a cross-up, and if you get hit by this, you explode. Finally, I developed this tactic in the corner that enabled coverage and mix-ups, which the developers were personally trying to weaken because of how strong it was in the original version. So after about 4 months or so, this led to the character being considered quite strong, and specifically, she was considered to be close to a top-tier character in that game. She's really close to my heart too, because the first really big tournament for the game, I actually hit a ton of stuff that I was labbing about the character while people were talking about how she had all these weaknesses and flaws. And while I unfortunately did not win, I did take it to like last game, and I showed up all the stuff that I was like, this shit is insane that she could do this. And the opinion of the character started to really change among most of the player base after that tournament. Which leads us to our final character. So the previous 2 characters were characters that people thought were not that good, and then over a period of time, and SJ Goku's case, I want to say it took probably around like 6 to 8 months for people to start thinking he was good. In Margaret's case, it took like 3 or 4. But we're going to close this video with a character that people thought was ridiculous on launch for a while, and then by the end of the version, he was considered to pretty much be a mid-tier. So we move to BlazBlue, and specifically BlazBlue Continuum Shift, and its protagonist, Ragna the Blood Edge. So you could call Ragna a Shoto, but usually if Ryu and Ken are like the poster boys of the Shoto archetype, then Arxis, I feel like, typically makes the main character for their games more like Ken coded than Ryu coded, if that makes sense. Think of like Soul versus Kai and Guilty Gear. Like Kai is very like traditional fundies, fireball, DP, anti-air type, where Soul is like run in your face and do stuff. BlazBlue's current version is Central Fiction. That was released back in 2015, but when the game was actively being supported, Ragna was commonly considered a top tier at the launch of pretty much every BlazBlue game. I'm looking at Continuum Shift 1, mostly because, to be honest, the previous game, BlazBlue Calamity Trigger, it's a funny game, and specifically in fighting game content, I feel like people always talk about the game, and this game in particular never gets talked about, so I'm going to use this version of Ragna specifically. Now, it's pretty common today for Shotos or all-around characters to be considered strong in general in fighting games. I main Guilty Gear Strive right now, and one of the biggest complaints throughout the game's lifespan is that the all-rounders / Shoto characters are too good. And Ragna at a glance does fall to this as well, so he has good run speed, he's actually quite fast. He has good pokes, like his 5B, they used to call this the Jesus kick, and 5C, which is this big slash. And in this version in particular, they gave him 5C, 2C. So this is actually pretty similar to Soul Bad Guy in older Guilty Gear games. So like XX, and he has this in Exert as well, where you have this big poke that has recovery, but you can cancel it on whiff, and he could move kind of fast. It's still slightly disadvantageous, but the opponent has to be pretty prepped, and usually they can't actually like hit you for doing this. He has a good simple jump in and jump C, and he has simple, easy tools for opening people up as well. So for example, I have the computer set to block everything, and he's crouching so you can see him switch. So Ragna has this attack, which is 6B, and this is an overhead, and he has Gauntlet Hades as a special move. On defense is actually pretty good because he has an invincible reversal, and specifically, he has the ability to hit confirm his reversal into a knockdown. So his defense is better than average. So BlazBlue, like Persona, is a 4-button game, and the big thing here is you have A, B, C, and D, but D is what really stands out here. That's for drive, and every character has a different one. So Jin can freeze you, which is direct, it's cool. He's an ice guy, that's cool. Wink wink, pardon the pun. Characters can fly around the screen. Oh my god, this is broken, by the way. Control the wind, and more. So Ragna's drive at a glance are just attacks, sword swipes, but when these attacks connect, Ragna actually gains a small amount of HP. It's not that noticeable in his standard attacks though, but you use these attacks quite a bit in combos, so it did add up. On top of that, he had this super, which at a glance doesn't look that crazy, but it powers up his drive, and when he does this, he regains quite a bit of HP. All his drive attacks have more hit stun as well, so you could do really big fat combos with this move. This meant that all around he was a simple, strong character that did pretty good damage, had ways to hit you, and could regain HP while hitting you, and had good cash outs with his meter. This all sounds well and good, and honestly sounds like a strong modern character, so why did Ragna fall off so hard? So for starters, other characters exist. There are characters in this game like Carl Clover, who can control another character independently of himself, that's really powerful, or my main Lychee, who used her staff to control space and had massive combos. So compared to these characters, Ragna doesn't really have like a special ability. Like he does, but it's essentially just another attack compared to being able to fly around the screen with the D button. You might remember I picked Tao and I did her drive and I went, oh my god, this is so broken. It's because it's just been a long time since I've seen Tao's Continuum Shift 1 drive, and they buffed it like crazy in this version and proceeded to nerf it in every subsequent version because of how good it is. And honestly, like, this version of Tao is her own video. I technically did one in the past, but I used like footage to the best of my ability. It was a few years ago, where now I'm like, dude, Like what? If you compare Ragna's drive to my old main Light Cheese, for example, so Light Cheese at a glance is not that impressive. Actually, she just puts this stick down, but this move is like insane. There's not really any other way I could put it, because she has follow-ups to this move. Basically, putting down her staff enables a whole different moveset of moves, new special moves, and you use the staff in tandem in order to do really, really, really long combos. And when I say combos can be optimized with her and be extremely long, this combo is considered her ENB for the corner off like a good starter, getting 5B. Quite a long combo into a really bad situation. And it didn't help that his mix-up was not that great. So if you remember earlier, they said the same thing about SJ Goku, but it really applies to Ragna. While he has this for a low, this is not actually his fastest move, and this, his 2A, is a mid. Now, to be fair, a lot of characters have this in this game at this time. But, for example, this combo I showed you before leads into a setup that has all sorts of mix-ups, and you get like 3 for 50 meter, and you get to refund yourself, which is an extremely powerful situation. And she can do this from mid-speed. And unlike SJ Goku, he doesn't really have the same like tricky left-right situation thing. Technically, there was one thing. It's a little bit expensive. It does cost 50 meter. But he has the forbidden cross-up DDP. But again, this costs meter to do. And meter is free, to be fair, in this game. But again, other characters don't need the meter first. They get the meter from hitting you. Now, I main Lychee and BBCT, so of course I continue to play her, especially when I heard Japanese players saying this character was broken. And this super at the end of this combo, Die Shutting, is one of the best supers I've ever seen in a fighting game I've played ever. So a big part of Ragna's mix-up game involved throw. And herein lies another problem, because the throw is 2 buttons. It's BC, and you also have barrier on AB. So if you play BlazBlue, you kind of know where I'm going with this, but you could cover your throw tech with the barrier by doing this. Technically, I don't know where he's doing it, and as soon as he gets me, I just tech right away. And at the time, the technique to beat this was not super well known. It's called the throw reject miss, which they actually made a lot more lenient in this game. I think lenient would be the right word, because in BBCT it was really, really hard to get this off. This is the idea of there's a window where if someone tries to throw tech, they can no longer do so, and because there's a throw tech in here and people can be thrown in block stun, you can do this. So to be fair to him, this was not that common at the time as well, which made people think his mix-up was weaker than it actually was. Unlike his peer Soul from Guilty Gear, Ragna does not have a command grab, so he doesn't have that as an option. So it was legitimately pretty difficult to open up an opponent. His damage is high, but it's BlazBlue Continuum Shift, so everyone's damage is high. There's a couple of characters that don't fit in this description for this game specifically. We don't need to talk about her. So he ends up paling in comparison. So by the end of the version, especially including DLC characters like Makoto Nanya and Valkenhayn R. Helsing, he really just fell to barely mid-tier. But yeah, that was times in my experience that the top players, pro players, were wrong about how good characters were. I've actually been sitting on this video idea for a while. I really want to reach out to people and see times in other games, because people, you know, the reaction to characters coming out is always kind of crazy. I could have just used Aba in this video for Guilty Gear, where people were saying she was bottom 1, and after a month, people started saying she was good. Happy Chaos, another classic example from Guilty Gear Strive. People said he sucked, and he ended up being, honestly, ruined the game, frankly, and probably could have been banned in Season 1 with how good he was. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. If there's any interesting examples that you can think of as well. As usual too, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Right now I'm posting both free and paid content on Patreon. A lot of the free stuff is just like general fighting game tips and Guilty Gear tips, so if you want to check that out, go over there. It's at patreon.com/LordKnight. I also do Guilty Gear coaching at metafy.gg/@LordKnight. I stream pretty much every weekday on Twitch, twitch.tv/LordKnight. Right now we're doing all characters to Vanquisher. I'm trying to post some videos about that here as well, but if you want to check that out, you can check it out on twitch.tv/LordKnight. And that's also where I record videos for the second channel, LordKnight Chronicles, so you can check that out as well. Like and subscribe if you guys feel like it, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.